Hi, today is treat day. We are going to do the Cape Gooseberry tart, which I'm going to adapt my own recipe, which I initially made for tinned gooseberries because the fresh ones weren't available. Now that we've got so many beautiful fresh gooseberries, I'm going to make it with that. So onto the sweet short crust pastry first. We have 1.5 cups of flour and 1/3 cup of caster sugar in here. I've got 125 grams of cold butter. We're going to pulse this to get breadcrumb effect. So if you have a look, that's the sort of texture you want. To this we're going to add 1 egg yolk. And then we're going to add, the recipe is 1 tablespoon of iced water. But that is the one thing about baking that is not finite. It depends on the absorption of your flour, so that you always have to have a little bit of flexibility as far as the liquid that you add. So we're going to turn this on. And we're going to add the water. So I can see I'm going to need to add a little bit more. So that's 2 tablespoons. Just drizzle it in until your dough comes together. That's the sound of it coming together. So this is what you want. This is your dough that's come together. Now I'm going to wrap it in plastic, and I'm going to just put it to rest in the fridge for 30 minutes. I've taken the pastry out of the fridge after 30 minutes. I'm letting it just come a little bit to room temperature because it's still very hard. What I'm going to be doing now is I'm going to make a little praline for the top of the tart. So I'm going to just put a little bit of caster sugar into this pot. Turn it on. And then I have bashed a few almonds, which are going to go in here. So let's let the sugar melt with the nuts, and we'll get a nice praline, which we're going to pour onto here to cool. And then I'm going to use as just a crunch topping on top of the gooseberry tart. I haven't put masses of sugar because I don't want it to be too much of the sugar aspect, more of the nut aspect with a little bit of sugar on it. So the sugar is all melted and the nuts are lightly toasted. So this is going to come onto here to set. And then I can break it up and put it on top of the tart at the end. You can see this is all already setting, so I'm going to let this just get hard on my spatula, and then I will break it off. That can stay. So let's roll out the pastry between 2 sheets of cling film, which makes it easier. And I'll just flip it over, release it so that it is going to move in the plastic. Again, this is short crust, so you don't have to worry too much about rips and tears. It's easy to repair. Release the top again. Flip it over. Release this one. And roll it out some more. Right, let's see if this is going to fit. I'm using a pie dish. Would it be easier to use a loose-bottomed Tart tin, which I don't have on me, so I'm just going to use this, and I've put a little bit of baking paper on the bottom. So that's fine. It's a little bit thick, which I'm not going to be fussed about. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to put some baking paper on top of this. And then I found my baking beads, which are really heavy and great. So those are going to go in. Whoops. Spread them right to the edge, because you don't want it to puff up too much. And it's going to go into the oven for 10 minutes at 180. Then we will remove this baking paper and put it in for another 5 to 10 minutes. This has had 10 minutes. So let's remove this. And these are ceramic baking beads, so the heat is magnified in the beads, which is fantastic for pastry. I'm going to give it a prick, and then I'm going to put it in for about 10 minutes. I've left this all around the edge here, so that's the part that's going to be exposed. So if that gets too brown, that is the part that I could remove and take it down to the size. And then this goes back in for 10 minutes because I've left it a little bit thicker than I would ordinarily, because I don't have a loose bottom tin. So it's going to be really difficult to get it out if it's not a little bit thicker. So I'm going to give it a little bit longer in the oven. I'm using 2 punnets of gooseberries this size, which I have washed, and I'm going to put them in here because I first made this recipe for tinned gooseberries, as I've said, so now I'm having to adapt it. I'm going to put some lovely fresh thyme in here, and then I'm going to put a little bit of sugar in, no more than about 2 tablespoons, with a little bit of water, because I need a little bit of sauce for this, and you will see why in a minute. So we're going to let this, just as those berries start bursting, that's when we're going to stop this. Because I said this was treat day, this is a double treat day for us because we finally got our internet fiber installed. So I'm going to add a smidge of gin, which you don't have to use if your supplies are dwindling as fast as everybody's are. You can just leave it as the water. I'm just going to do this just because it gives a little bit of an extra dimension taste to it. Okay, the reason that I want these berries to get to the bursting stage is because it will start leaching a little bit of the actual gooseberry juice into this. So this is the fun part. We're going to use custard powder. I'm going to use 1 heaped dessert spoon and hope that that's enough. I will obviously adjust this if it isn't quite right. A little bit of water, and that's why you wanted the sugar into that, because otherwise it's going to be a horrible bitter sort of flavor. So this is going to go in, and hopefully it's enough to thicken this. If it isn't, I will add a little bit more. But this shows you that you don't have to be quite so stringent with everything when you cook. You can actually just see if it's going to work out for you or not. I don't want this to be really too thick, so I'm going to have a little bit of water on standby, because this tart goes into the fridge and it doesn't get baked again. So we just want this to have a nice consistency, but it will thicken as it goes into the fridge. It gives a lovely golden color to this because of the custard powder, and which is obviously a natural setting agent. You can see from when it is hot like this, the consistency of it, and know that it's going to thicken when it's cold. So you can adjust it. I'm going to add a little bit more water. And I would say that that is pretty good. Have a taste of it. And then from there you can see if you need a little bit more sugar. But there's sugar in the sweet crust pastry and there is some sugar in this, and I don't like things to be overly sweet, so I'm going to leave it at that. And that's the timer for it to come out of the oven. Okay, let's check this out. I think I'm going to give it another 2 minutes or so. This has come out. I've given it a couple of minutes extra because it is not going to be baked further, and I wanted the thickness that I have done to be cooked through. That is going to now cool along with this, which you can see is gorgeous, glorious golden color. And that's going to cool a little bit. This is going to cool, then we're going to put that inside there. That is then going to go into the fridge, and then the praline which I have made, the almond praline, which is the extra sweetened bit that is going to go on the top, which is why I didn't want this to be overly sweet. That's going to go on the top and give it a beautiful golden crunch. So we will assemble this when everything is cool. Patience is needed at this stage. Okay, this is cooled marginally. I don't want it to cool too much because obviously it's going to set. So I'm going to pour this in. Could have done with 3 punnets actually. Here we've got all this groovy gold sauce, which is really important to making this set in the fridge. Okay, so I am now, when I do this, I'm going to just break this pastry down a little bit so that it's not quite such a canyon and looks really schnoop with the filling. So we're going to leave this to set. You can see beautiful green flecks of thyme in there. There's a little bit of hibiscus and nachi gin in there, which gives it another dimension. It's got a bit of sugar and it's got the custard powder, which is going to let it set. And then once this is set in the fridge and is completely cold, we're going to add the praline. And if we added the praline now, it would melt the sugar and then you would lose this gorgeous crunch. And that's what we want. We want it to be a little bit more textural and to have the beautiful nuts and sugar on the top. So this is going to go into the fridge now to set. Okay, I've managed to get this out of the tin because I put the paper underneath. It looks ghastly because I've used the wrong tin. So it's a little bit butchered. And this is when some really nice flowers, edible flowers around the edge would be good, or some whipped cream or something. But we are just going to make do. So we've got our lovely praline, which we're going to sprinkle all over. And then serve this with some whipped cream or some creme fraiche, which is what I always prefer to use over whipped cream because it gives that lovely acidity to it. And there you have gooseberry tart. Now let's cut a slice and see what the inside is like. Okay. So that's the inside. Set. Fabulous. It's really a treat worth having. I hope you enjoy it. Okay, I've managed to get this out of the tin because I put the paper underneath. It looks ghastly because I've used the wrong tin. So it's a little bit butchered. And this is when some really nice flowers, edible flowers around the edge would be good. Or some whipped cream or something. But we are just going to make do. So we've got our lovely praline, which we're going to sprinkle all over. And then serve this with some whipped cream or some creme fraiche, which is what I always prefer to use over whipped cream because it gives that lovely acidity to it. And there you have gooseberry tart. Now let's cut a slice and see what the inside is like. Okay. So that's the inside. Set. Fabulous. It's really a treat worth having. I hope you enjoy it.